Newsom now has ordered the state parole board to assess the public risk of Lyle and Erik Menendez's potential release. So this announcement comes just some months after the attorneys for the convicted killers filed that petition for clemency with the governor's office. This also comes days after we saw LA County District Attorney Nathan Hochman opposing what's called the habeas corpus petition. That's the petition for the new trial. Now, here's some more from Governor Newsom speaking about his decision in a teaser for his new podcast.
There's no guarantee of outcome here. My office conducts dozens and dozens of these clemency reviews on a consistent basis, but this process simply provides more transparency, which I think is important in this case, as well as provides us more due diligence before I make any determination for clemency.
Oh, he's got a new podcast, huh? Okay. So 90 days have been allotted for the risk assessment investigation. And this morning we're asking our power panel, do you believe the governor will release the Menendez brothers? Let's bring them all in. Still with me, attorneys Michael J. Brown and John Phillips, and want to welcome in criminology expert, author, and professor at St. Thomas University, Dr. Debbie Goodman. Dr. Debbie, let me start with you. What do you think about this?
Good morning, Julie. Always a pleasure to join you. I think, Julie, this is a crime of hate. You know, we always talk about acronyms and we create the talking points. So for me, this is such a heinous crime for Erik and Lyle to have purchased 12-gauge shotguns. They shot mother Kitty 10 times, father Jose 6 times. Then the behavior became arrogant, right? Post-mortem, they go on their lavish shopping sprees and buy high-end watches and sports cars. And the T is for terror. They wreaked absolute terror on their parents who gave them life. They took their lives, and ultimately the E in hate, for me, is evil. So altogether, I think that, as we've talked before, crimes of familicide, patricide, matricide, they've been sentenced to life. But what do I think will happen? I think the risk assessment will take place. 3 areas will be looked at very carefully: past, present, future. And I do think there's a high probability that a decision may be made to resentence.
Oh, this is so helpful. I love your analysis, Dr. Debbie. I've got more questions about these 2 killers for you. Let's ask our other guest the question with Gavin Newsom. Is he going to be the one to do it? He's in the hot seat on this one, getting some pressure out there. John Phillips, what do you say?
He kind of created his own hot seat, didn't he, though? Like, you know, everybody's got a podcast, including the governor of California. And I'm not going to make too much fun because I'm on a plane to California a little later today. I don't want to be picked up.
They better treat you right, John.
They better. But listen, I got into the OJ series on Netflix this week while I'm on the treadmill. And I, you know, the 90s were key for me as I was becoming a college student, law student, lawyer, because you had the OJ trial and you had the Menendez trial, and all of us lived it. You know, those of us around in the 90s lived this and know what a heinous crime it really was. And certainly we got to take abuse seriously and address abusers, and, you know, sometimes take a compassionate relook at things, but seems to be a bit of a gap of those that remember how bad this crime was, like Dr. Goodman was saying, versus, oh, well, they were victims too, when all of that kind of was weighed back then. But you know, Governor Newsom is kind of taking that latter approach.
Right, John. And I really appreciate the last point you made. It's like there are factions of people who seem to have amnesia, got a lobotomy, something, and they're forgetting what these guys did. I mean, it's just like, okay, so we don't even know if the sexual abuse happened. That very clearly, you hear Nathan Hochman going through all their litany of lies they told about these stories that were so self-serving. So we don't even know if they're abuse victims, but we do know they did these 2 homicides. Boy, oh boy, Gavin Newsom has a big decision. Gavin Newsom, rather, has a big decision to make. Michael J. Brown, let me get to you for your thoughts on this, please.
Julia, I think his decision, whether right or wrong, I do think he's going to end up granting the clemency and/or a resentencing situation. I think he would rather defer to the DA and let him make that move, but I don't know if the DA is going to take him off the hook on that. And I think the risk assessment is certainly going to, if I had to predict and bet the ranch, it's going to come back favorable. Other than this horrific crime, and I hate to say other than, everything they've done in jail has been great. They've been model prisoners. They've been helping people. And I'm not suggesting they'd be released, but from the governor's standpoint, he's going to have a very favorable risk assessment document that's going to say, hey, folks, the parole board is saying they're model prisoners and they're going to be an asset to society. So I do believe he's going to cut them loose at some point in the near future.
Great points. Michael J. Brown, you nailed it. You know, he would rather this be on Nathan Hochman, wouldn't it? I mean, initially he was, oh, we're going to defer, you know, but then it was kind of like a tennis match, right, where we saw the DA say at that last presser, well, you know, the governor, he's got the petition on his desk. He can do what he wants. So it was like a right back at you is what he said. Okay, let's talk about the other method of release. So we've got the habeas petition wanting a new trial. The DA has expressed his opposition. Gavin Newsom, big question mark. We don't know what he's going to do with the clemency petition. And then we've got the resentencing hearing. California has these weird laws where after so many years, criminals can get resentenced for their crimes. During the presser last week, he talked a little bit about that. Let's take a listen.
Rehabilitation is not an issue for the habeas motion. And I want to make that crystal clear, that all the talk about rehabilitation will be talk that will be focused on in the resentencing motion. But as I mentioned before, the habeas motion focuses on the evidence at trial.
Okay, so findings from Governor Newsom's risk assessment will be given to DA Hochman's office and the judge who's going to be presiding over the resentencing, making the ultimate decision. So our next question, what will DA Hochman say at resentencing? Is he going to push back on that too? Dr. Debbie, back to you, please.
Well, I think everybody will be with consistency and continuity in how this gets reviewed. So some of the points made, there will be a look at how are they performing the last 35 years with their incarceration. And it is true, they have created hospice-related services for elder inmates. They've been involved in beautifying the surroundings, if you will, of green space and such. There have been no altercations with other inmates and the prison officers. So to that end, they are viewed favorably. But a big question I would have, Julie, as a criminologist is, will there be a repeat of crimes and criminality? See, if we just look at the data analytics, we know that those offenders who participate in the violent types of crimes, murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, that's the population who has the highest probability to reoffend. But again, every case has to be examined case by case. I think ultimately the decision will likely be a resentence and a possible release.
Really great points, Dr. Debbie. Thank you for that. John Phillips, back to you. Do you think that Nathan Hochman is going to push back on resentencing too?
He is. I think he's going to take a. So which past do you want to weigh, right? Do you want to weigh the past of the 30 minutes or so of this horrific murder, or do you want to weigh how they responded to their conviction? And I think a prosecutor really has to focus on the crime. That's what they do. And certainly you can give a nod to how they've rehabilitated. I know my dear friend Bob Shapiro is also, wanting the Menendez brothers released. And he didn't say that for the other guy that he represented. But I think he has to take a pretty hardline stand because his job is crime.
Sure. Michael J. Brown, your thoughts on this. What's the DA going to do at resentencing?
I take a different approach to John, only because, remember, district attorneys are elected officials. They unfortunately are politicians. And there's a groundswell apparently in that area and in the state and even the nation of releasing these two individuals because of all they've done over the course of their last 35 years. And the family is in their corner, which is really easy for the DA to go along with this position because, well, the family's in their favor. And unfortunately, and I really mean this, time heals wounds in the sense that the death and the horrific murders are somewhat forgotten. And all they're focusing now is on this rehabilitation part of it. So I actually do think that that the district attorney will reconsider and they'll be let out soon.
Michael, thank you for that. You're all making great points. I want to end on the point of, I think the big question I have in my mind is how dangerous are these guys? Like if they get let out and if they move next door to you, should you be afraid of the Menendez brothers? Dr. Debbie Goodman, let's end with you answering that question for us, please.
Well, thank you, Julie. Again, for me, it's tough to let murderers out in a free society and potentially reoffend. But as we've talked many times on the program, is it a singular homicide, double, triple, quadruple, workplace, family? The likelihood, I think, on this particular circumstance is that they've served their 35 years, their families are in favor of their release, and I don't think necessarily that they would participate again in a homicide.
Well, that's reassuring, to hear, Dr. Debbie, and that's really what's going to matter most if they do get let out. I know we're going to keep this conversation going. We'll pick it up another day. Dr. Debbie, I know we need to let you get to your class. Give your students our best. Thanks for your expertise and your time.